how to taste wine, the basics. I'm Wisconsin Wine Guy. I'm going to take you through step by step and how to taste wine. We're going to focus each session, each broadcast, we're going to focus on just one step in that process. And there's five steps. Now, four steps in the tasting wine. You have the look, you have the smell, you have the taste, and then you have the finish. And then I added on a fifth process, a fifth step, not necessarily a step, but an additional thing, which is called the wine faults. We'll talk about that. But tonight, we're totally going to focus on the look. So what is meant by that, the look, the visual analysis? First, let's begin by saying we all drink wine, and we all can drink wine. That's the easiest thing to do. Just take the glass, put it to your mouth, boom, there you go. But when we want to take a position and decide on the quality by our standards, quality of the wine, is it going to be a good wine for me, or is it a good wine in general? And so that's what we're going to be analyzing. That's what we're going to be doing here today. And that first step is going to be the look. And there's many opportunities, when you think about the look when it comes to wine. It just doesn't necessarily begin when the wine is in the glass. The look happens at many points throughout your wine drinking adventure. Let's say when you're going to the store and you're looking to purchase a bottle of wine. If it's a white wine or a red wine, you're looking at the labels, you're picking up the bottle, you're reading the description of the wine. You may even look at the wine that's inside of the bottle. If it's a white wine, it's clear enough, you're like, wow, that wine is yellow, or it's amber, or it's very clear, or it may be a situation when it's a red wine and you're looking at the wine and you're seeing, you tilt the bottle and you're seeing some a dark spots on the inside of the glass, representing sediment, so there's all type of visual clues or visual analysis that goes on when you're looking at the wine. So that's one opportunity looking at the wine. The second opportunity that happens when you're going out to a restaurant and the wine steward comes over and they hand you the wine list. And so you're looking over the wine list and trying to decide which wine I'm going to order. So you finally pick your wine. That next step that happens, again, this is all about the look. That next step that happens is the wine steward comes back with that bottle of wine and begins to make a presentation. Makes a presentation of the wine, showing you the label and asking you simply, is this your wine, sir or ma'am? And you respond with, after you read the label, you respond with, absolutely, that is my wine. Why your mouth is watering? Because it's going to be a good one. Because you selected it. And so now the wine steward, they go through the ritual of opening up the wine, whether it be a screw cap or a cork or a natural cork, opening up the wine, and we're going to skip the phase on decanting, and just go straight to the wine is now being poured into the glass. And that's where we go into another phase of looking. Now, again, I say to you, we can all drink wine, but let's try to evaluate our wines in order to determine if we're picking a good wine for ourselves. One thing to keep in mind, wine and its analysis is subjective. Even though there are processes, there are standards, but it's always subjective. My opinion will probably be completely different than yours, whether we're looking at the same wine or different wines. And if we have the same wine, it's even more amazing that my opinion and your opinion can be completely opposite in what we see or what we smell, what we taste. All right, so now, as we go through the looking phase, so we have the wine steward has poured the wine into our glass, and we have our wines in front of us, and I'm going to start with the white wine, and as I do the white wine, if you have a red wine, the same process is entitled. So what are we looking at, when we're looking at a glass of wine? But first and foremost, when you're inside of your restaurant, you're going to do this whole process quickly. But for tonight, we're going to take our time. So what are you looking at? So you're picking up the glass and you're looking down, whether it be the white wine or red wine, looking right down on the center, of the wine inside of the glass, and trying to see if there's any noticeable, simple term, floaties. inside of your wines. That's one way, looking down, and you're checking out the color, seeing if there's any haze, any haze or any film on top of the wine. So that was my white wine. I did it, and now I'm doing it with my red wine. Same thing. Looking down, checking out the color, seeing if there's any floaties in the glass, any sediment, anything. So that's one thing with the look, And so now, and when we're looking at that, we're going to discuss what we're looking for when we do that. Next thing is, maybe tilting the glass. This is before we even get to the cloth. I like to tilt the glass and just look at the wine, take a look underneath, see if there's any noticeable bubbles, because I didn't order a sparkling wine, I ordered a still wine. So I want to make sure there's no obvious signs of bubbles in the glass. Because if there are some, that it could be just a slight sign of some effervescence. Maybe a second fermentation took place, in the bottle, but it's just ever so slight, and we'll talk about why that may happen. All right. So we're taking a look, put it up to some light, take a look underneath, and see what you got. And this wine looks pretty good for a white wine. So we're doing the same thing with the red, tilting, looking at the wine, looking for sediment. You may notice sediment. It can happen in some of your older wines. It can happen in some wines that are probably 5+ years. So you want to check that. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong with the wine. It just means that the color or some of the wine itself or the juice itself, it begins to fall off. Okay? It begins to thin out. So we looked at the wine, and again, if you're coming in, if you're looking, just simply say hi, and I'll try to acknowledge you. So we're looking at the wine, and now we have our linen in front of us. My white paper. We have our linen in front of us to make sure you have good lighting, and then you're tilting the glass about a 45-degree angle, okay? And what you're looking at when you're doing that, and make sure that you are kind of situated, the glass is down low enough that you're looking right over the wine at a 45-degree angle. And here's what you're looking at. You're starting from, you're starting from the top of the rim, going down towards the center of the bowl. Okay, so the top of the rim towards the center of the bowl. So we have our paper, our napkin, or our white linen. We have our light. And so what we're looking for now, when we start looking at the rim, we're looking at that as a very, very minute trim. Say like a centimeter. Trim around the topper edge of the rim of the wine, or the tip of the liquid in the bottle. You're looking at that color, and as you begin to look back towards the bowl, you're seeing how that color changes, and you're analyzing, is it a consistent color? Is it a gradual change from a lightness to a darkness, or from a darkness to a light? That could be interesting. But you're looking at that gradual change. Now, this is where your color palettes come into play, because you're trying to get an idea of your color scheme for your particular wine. Now, what I've done in the past is I have this color scheme in which I gave to you to download. If you are doing this at home and you want to have some actual material in your hand, I would, when I did wine tastings in the past, I would go to the local paint store and get those, what they call them, the wine palettes. The color palettes. Grab some of those, which will show you different variations of the color of wine. And using those as a guide and having the name of the color there, it helps you identify the color you have in your wine. So, looking at your color palette, either use chart 1 or chart 2, and what you're going to do is when you're looking at the rim of your glass, and as it comes down, you come down to the bowl, you are matching it with the colors on your color guide, okay, or your color chart, all right? And looking at my particular wine, all right, I have like a light yellowish rim. As we come down, it comes down to more like a pineapple kind of a color as we get down to the center of the bowl. So when I go down, I write down my color, or in my mind, I say, okay, it's a wine that has a nice little depth of color to it, light to dark. It's fairly young. Now let's say the opposite. The opposite of that would be if it was kind of a little tint on the rim and it got darker. All right, and the darkness can go from a deep gold, this is like a butterscotch color, or it can go to a amber, on a white wine. Now, again, you do the same thing using the color chart. Do the same thing with your, hello, Meredith, how are you doing? I'm glad you can join for a little bit. You do the same thing with your red wine. Again, 45-degree angle. We do it this way so you can see 45 degrees over your paper with natural lighting. You're looking at the rim, and you go from the rim to the bowl, and you look at the color, match the color of the rim as you come down to the bowl as it gets darker. Match those colors with your color chart that you have. And when doing that, looking at my red here, I have sort of like a brick. I have like a brick red. It goes from brick red down to a garnet and a little bit of ruby. Okay, on this one here, so it's more reddish than it will be purple, as it can be in some wines. All right, I mean, so that's one of the parts when looking at the wine and checking out the color. And when you're looking at the color, it's kind of giving you an idea of the youthfulness of the wine, the age of the wine. If the white colors or the yellow colors are more amber, could be a lot of barrel aging, or it could be older, could be oxidized. If it's in the red, if it's like a deep red or ruby colored and it goes purple, it could be a young wine or just that particular grape itself. But if there's tints of brown, like a orangish red or brownish red, it gives you some sign of age on the wine. Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it's a little bit of age. But for both red and white, if it's like brown or tawny colored, then that wine is pretty old, or maybe it's probably oxidized. Now we go back to the looking at the color again and looking inside of the glass and seeing if there's any floaties. That brings me to a couple of definitions. Filtered wine versus fine wine, racking, cold stabilization. Well, what's its purpose? Okay, most of your wines that you're going to purchase, you can see right here, most of your wines are going to be clear. Okay, and this is probably a filtered plus a fine wine. Okay, so what does that mean? Schel. Well, a filtered wine is a wine that goes through a mechanical process, and through this process, you have these panels. These panels are these what do you call them? Filters. And as the wine passes through, some of the, and depending on the size of the thickness of the screens, we say, a lot of the large particles that are floating in the juice are being filtered out. So it passes through. So we have wine here, okay? Wine here, it has pieces of skin, maybe pieces of seed and stem and some leaves, but very minute, passes through the filters or the screens, and it comes out like this, okay? So that's filtering wine. And unfiltered wine would be just the opposite, okay? But then, if a wine is not filtered, it can be fine, or it can be filtered and fine. Well, what do you mean by fine? Well, if you ever made a clear broth, for the cooks out there, ever made a clear broth, or what the French call a consommé, and that's a clear broth. And what happens is when you make it a consommé, to get that consommé very bright, very clean, very clear, is you use protein. Vegetables, egg whites, eggshells, just protein, and what happens is it coagulates. It catches all of the floaties, the heavy floaties get caught up in this raft. And from there, you strain off your soup, or in this case, the wine, and all you're left with is just clear wine. Now, that's just fining. You may still have some minute particles after fining in your wine, and that's okay. And that's when we get into the phase of unfiltered. But then when they filter it through, then you may subject come out with a wine that's as clear as this wine here, or maybe the glass that you're looking at yourself. And the same thing goes for red wine. Even though the red wine, it's a lot harder to see, but the same process still applies. There is a clearness, there is a brilliance, to red wine as well when the wine is filtered. And if you ever had the chance to drink a unfiltered wine, then you would know the difference. I mean, it's a lot heavier, a lot fuller. There's a lot more substance to it. When I would make grape juice, I would not filter it, or I would filter it very lightly. Okay, so you can have that nice mouthfeel, you know, and the organic feel and taste of the juice. Same with wine. Another process is called racking. You know, let's say some winemakers may filter, but they may not find. You know, and it's called racking. With racking, what happens is when the wine is sitting in the barrel, or maybe it's sitting in the tank, you know, and all of the heavy particles, organic matter, floats down to the bottom. Okay, it sits for a few weeks, maybe a month. Hello there, Krissa. Krissa, how are you doing? You're getting thirsty, huh? Well, I hope you have some wine to go through this lesson. We're talking about racking now. So all the heavy particles are floating down to the bottom. And now that's another way of clarifying or clearing the wine. Okay? So if you don't want to use any fining agents, whether it be organic or non-organic, you don't want to use any filtering process, you can do the steps what's called racking. And now once the heavy particles float down or sink down to the bottom, now the wine is pumped out into another container, another barrel. Okay? And you'll keep doing that for as many times you think you need to do it in order to get your wine clear without disturbing its natural substance. Okay? And then there's cold stabilization. You ever had a wine, especially white wine, you know, when you pop the cork out of the wine, you looked at the bottom of that cork, and I didn't have it on this cork, we look at the bottom of the cork, and it's like crystals on the bottom of the wine. Okay? And that's a tartaric acid, you know, so it's an organic matter, organic byproduct, you can say, you know, from winemaking. But sometimes you'll find that in the bottom of your wine glass. And it's a lot to do with changes in temperatures or when a wine is really cold. All right? So cold stabilization, what happens is more so in a white wine, it takes the wine, they chill it down so that those crystals form, and just like racking, just like filtering, and then the wine is filtered out, and those crystals are left behind. And you may find some in there, some may escape, some may get through, you know, but maybe not. So that's when you're looking at the wine and looking at clear, you know, to look at the color of the wine, its clarity. So something else about filtering, you know, which is also important, is to make the wine stable. You know, filtering also, you try to capture all that yeast. So remember earlier I was speaking about when you're looking at your wine and you see bubbles in your wine, you're thinking not the bubbles that happens when the wine is poured in the glass, but after the wine has settled and you're looking at the wine, you see little floaty bubbles like a sparkling wine. Well, as I said, I didn't order a sparkling wine, so why do I have bubbles? You know, now that could have happened because of a second fermentation took place in the bottles. So maybe the wine was filtered, but some of the yeast managed to stay in the wine, and some may have gotten in the bottle. And every now and then, you'll find you may come across a wine. If you purchase a case, you may come across one wine that may have fizz. So that's the looking at the wine and looking at the wine's clarity. And we just went through, you know, again, some definitions of fining, filtering, unfiltered wine, racking, and cold stabilization. All right, and we looked at the color. Now, if you had a chance to look at the wine and look at the color, I mean, type in your comments and give me an idea of what your wine looked like, or if you have any questions before we move on to the next phase when we're looking at the wine. Okay? All right, so now we're still looking at the wine. As I mentioned earlier, the look part of the wine, it has an importance, but it's not so important. Again, you just want to make sure that there's no floaties in your wine. If you have an issue with floaties, maybe there's some cork left in the wine because the cork was probably dried out, or the cork may have broken in the wine. And if you're spending, you know, a couple $100 a bottle on the wine, you don't want cork floating around in your bottle. You know, or maybe it's an older wine, and because it's an older wine, maybe it's 10+ years old, and you find sediment, you know, the dropping of the wine, the natural particles of the wine, and you probably don't want those in your glass. I don't know if any one of you have ever had a wine that had sediment left in it, and you go to drink the wine, and you get some of that grit on your palate. You know, it's not a pleasant feeling, you know, when you're drinking wine, or you may get a little bit of sludge. It's not harmful because it's a part of the wine, but it's unpleasant to the palate when you're drinking wine. Okay, so that's what you're looking for when looking at the wine. And again, back to the color, we spoke a little bit about the wine's hue. you know, and some of those color hues we were talking about, we're going to deal with the white wine first. So with the white wine, you'll go from pale to greenish yellow. Again, that's looking at the rim, 45-degree angle, starting from the rim, looking down towards the bowl. You know, so you're looking at having going from a pale to yellowish green, you know, which can be sort of like a young wine, and maybe a wine that was made or the grapes were grown in a cooler climate. You know, so again, we're talking about clues and looking at color. Or it can go like a straw yellow, right? So pale green, a pale to greenish yellow to a yellow gold to gold color, okay? You know, which could be an aged wine, you know, maybe aged in barrel, you know, for like 5 to 6 years, you know, or it can be amber brown. It could be a very, very aged wine, you know, again, aged in a barrel. Could have been aged in the barrel for, say, 2 years, 24 months. You know, some Chardonnays can be in a barrel for 18 to 24 months. You know, which is going to give that wine a much darker color. But then if it goes beyond that, okay, if it goes beyond that, I would say be a little cautious. You know, smell the wine. You know, we get to that phase, talk about that in a minute on another lesson. But smell the wine, take a look at it. But if it's not pleasing to you on its look, you know, if you're in a restaurant, they say, you know, that wine is just not working for me on its look. You know, but by all means, give it a taste, because maybe it doesn't look like the way you expect it should look, but it may taste fine. Now, the same thing happens with the red as the wine begins to age. Starting out as a wine that is maybe brick red or deep red or a deep purple, you know, and then it begins to change as it ages. You know, the brighter the hue, okay, again, same thing, going from the tip of the rim, the edge of the wine, down to the bowl, the brighter the hue, the younger the wine can be in most cases. As it ages, it goes from a deep purple or a red down to a crimson colored, you know, or a crimson or ruby color. You know, again, it's talking about young wine. Then it goes into red. It goes into a reddish brown. And if it goes beyond, we're talking about the rim. If you go from the rim down to the bowl and it begins to go beyond a reddish brown to tawny and more brownish tawny, again, maybe a situation that the wine is more than likely past its prime. Past its prime, and maybe air got into the wine, is oxidized. Again, oxidation you can tell much clearly in a white wine than you can in a red wine, but the step is still the same. But what is oxidation, Shell? Well, if you ever peel an apple, peel the skin off your apple, or cut an apple in half, and as you're setting your slices down, you're eating one, this is without putting lemon juice on it, okay? You're setting your apple down, and as you're eating the one piece, you're noticing that your other pieces are turning brown. Or when you're making a salad that involves apple and you're putting in the salad, you notice the pieces are turning brown. What is becoming oxidized? You know, the air is breaking down or deteriorating, slowly breaking down the physical parts of the apple. So it's turning colors. Same thing happens with wine. You know, if we were to take this wine, again, you say, well, that's kind of a contradiction, Shell, because the wine is sitting in the air right now. Well, it's not going to break down quite that fast in a wine as we're talking about a fresh product like an apple. If this was a grape, you would notice it, you know, the changes in the color and the changes in the taste. But because the wine went through a process of being made and being broken down and being put back together, it's going to happen, but not that fast. What you will notice in your wine as you sit, let's say we sit here and we taste this wine with this first pour in our glass, and we may take another sip 30 minutes later. It has to be a full glass, of course, and we're sitting talking with our friends. We take another sip another 45 minutes later, and then another one another 30 minutes later. Now, some of us don't take that long to drink our wine. I understand that. But for this lesson purposes, we're going to assume that we're so engaged in conversation that we didn't notice. What you'll begin to notice on each sip is the changes in that wine. You know, it'd be fresh. If it's a white wine, it's going to start off being very, very fresh, very, very vibrant. But as it sits and it sits in the air and it begins to warm up, you know, your palate's going to notice a change in its taste. It's going to go like this. It's going to be like here, All right, high. It's going to go high because it's peaking. I'm like, this is so great. Then it's going to go slightly down with a small peak because it's going to evolve. It's warmer now, so more of the wine's taste is going to come out, or the aroma. Then it's going to go down again. And you start noticing, okay, it's okay. It still smells good. It's a little bit warmer in the mouth, you know, but the smell isn't the same as it was when it was here. You know, another 45 minutes, an hour later, it goes down even more. All right, so that's what happens. I seem to notice it more in red wines, and depending on the age of the wines, than I notice it in white wines. So if you have any questions about the look, again, the visual analysis of wine, here's the time now to ask your questions. So we just went through, again, visual analysis. We are opening the wine. We're looking at the color of the wine, making sure, looking down inside the glass, making sure there are no floaties in our wine, both red and white. You know, we're spinning it around, just checking it out real good. You know, we're looking at the color of the wine, making sure that it has a nice gradual coloring as it goes from the rim down to the bowl of the wine, a bowl of the glass, the wine glass, you know, and determining. We're seeing if it's, we can tell if it's filtered or unfiltered, making sure there's no sediment left in the glass, you know, and that is our look. Very simple, you know, very, very simple analysis. And now I hope you understand what it means when you're looking at the wine.